my name is Grace and I am a high school English teacher. Thanks so much for watching this video. In response to the hashtag I've been seeing going around, Dear First Year Teacher, I wanted to share my story of my first year of teaching, which is very different from most people's and involves quitting in the middle of the year. But I'm still a teacher now several years later, and I want to talk a little bit about my experience. I quit my job in the middle of my first year of teaching. I was this eager, enthusiastic new teacher in August, setting up my classroom, getting to know my curriculum, all that. And by January, I was sitting at home on my couch crying because I had just quit the job I thought I was called to. So the reason I'm doing this is I want to share a word of encouragement. If you're a new teacher or someone who's thinking of going into teaching, if you've left teaching and are trying to decide if you want to get back into it, or even if you're just interested in the whole world of teaching, I hope that this story can help some people learn from what I went through and maybe help avoid some of my mistakes, but also kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of how things can get better. I will say that I've only been teaching for, like I said, 3 years. I do not consider myself an expert. I don't know where in your teaching career you get to be not a novice anymore. Is it 5 years, 10 years? Somebody tell me, because it does not feel like 3. But I do think that what I can say can be encouraging, and I do have a little bit of advice based on what I went through. I also want to give a disclaimer. I'm not going to talk about the school I taught at. I'm not going to say where it was. I'm not going to say what grade exactly. I'm not going to say things I liked or didn't like about my school. For the purposes of this video, I want to talk about myself, how I've grown as a teacher, what I learned. I'm going to do this video in 2 parts. First, I'm going to just say what happened, why I quit, and what happened after. And then I'm going to explain what I learned from the experience and what advice I would give new teachers. I grew up wanting to teach. I felt called to teach. I knew that teaching was something I was good at. I always got good grades in my education classes. I did really well in student teaching. Everyone told me I was going to be a great teacher. My mom was a teacher. My grandma was a teacher. I just felt like teaching was my thing. I had it locked down. It was going to be awesome. Spoiler alert, it was not always awesome. Right out of college, I was hired to teach middle school English. This was exactly what I wanted to teach at the time. Since then, I've actually transitioned to high school, and I love teaching high school, but at the time I was pretty sure I wanted to teach middle school. That was going to be my thing. So I got my dream job. I was teaching middle school. I liked the class sizes. I liked the classroom. I liked my coworkers. Felt like things were going to be great. I thought I had procedures and expectations set up properly for my class. It turns out that was overestimated how prepared I was. After a very eventful first day ever of teaching, in which I locked my keys and my copies and all of my handouts and my lunch in my car, and I will tell that story in another video sometime. Teaching was hard. I had a hard time building relationships with kids, which I'd never really struggled with before. I had a hard time figuring out what to teach. We didn't really have a curriculum, so I had to invent a lot of stuff myself. I definitely was disorganized. I definitely struggled with my classroom management, with being consistent. I knew what the mistakes were that you're not supposed to make, but it is really hard when you're new to realize just how consistent you have to be, how organized you have to be, what that actually looks like when it's lived out in a teaching situation. I also feel like I spent more time when I first started making my classroom cute and pretty and then making it organized and efficient. And that is a huge mistake to make, and I will never make that again. Things became really difficult. I will be perfectly honest, I was in tears a lot. I was stressed. I was not feeling good about my progress. I was struggling to deliver instruction and see growth in students. I was just in over my head in a lot of ways. I was experiencing anxiety, and it was very difficult to get up in the mornings and go to school. And that was kind of my first sign that something was wrong. My classroom became more of a place of fear than a place of joy or excitement for me. And that was when I knew I needed to do something. The worst part of this is that I started to feel like a really bad teacher. I started to feel like this thing I had always been good at, this thing that I loved, this thing that was my calling, wasn't for me, that I was just not cut out, that I just couldn't do it. So in January of my first year of teaching, I chose to resign. I had agonized over this decision. It was the hardest decision I've ever made. I was so guilty about leaving the kids, and I felt like such a failure and so ashamed of myself. It was really hard. I totally lost confidence in myself as a teacher. I felt like there was just no future for me in this, and it was terrifying. But I was determined to figure out how to be a better teacher and not give up. So for that second semester of that year, I subbed. I went into middle schools and high schools and even an elementary school and subbed on a daily basis. It's not the best job in the world. But subbing was hugely helpful with my classroom management, because when you sub, you have to walk into that classroom and be the boss. You can't doubt yourself because the kids are already going to be pushing you. So after subbing on a daily basis for a couple months, I actually got hired as a long-term sub in a high school English classroom. I found out they were reading Romeo and Juliet and The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian by Sherman Alexie, which are two of my favorite texts to teach. And I took the job, and it was really fun. I had so much more confidence from subbing, and it kind of helped me reclaim and redeem the classroom from this place of, honestly, kind of trauma to a place of excitement again. And then after teaching summer school that summer and getting, again, more practice, I applied for and was hired at my current job. And I love it. I've been teaching, like I said, 2 years at my current school, and I plan to stay for a while. I really enjoy it. I've taken on leadership roles. I have great relationships with kids. I have good relationships with my coworkers. I love them to death. I've been given good evaluations. I'm involved in different teams. I've gotten lots of PD and experience, and it's kind of like night and day. I'm the same teacher. I teach in the same city with roughly the same population of kids, same demographics, a slightly bit older, but only a couple years. And it is completely different. I'm so well supported at my current school, and they've really helped me grow into the kind of teacher I want to be. Not that I'm perfect, because I will not lie and say that teaching still isn't hard. Honestly, it is. But it's so much more fun now that it's not crazy and chaotic and awful. And I'm so glad I didn't give up on teaching, because it is what I'm called to do and I love it. My biggest piece of advice is, if you're teaching in a place that is harmful to you emotionally and physically and spiritually and psychologically, it's okay to leave. We get told enough that we have to be martyrs, that we have to sacrifice everything for kids, that teachers should be like a candle that extinguishes itself to light the flame of children. No. Teachers are people, and unhealthy, unhappy people can't help others. Don't get me wrong, students are so important for me, and I do make a lot of sacrifices for my kids. There's no way you can say that teaching is not a career that involves selflessness. It does. That's why a lot of us are drawn to teaching in the first place. But teaching doesn't mean just giving up on yourself and totally ignoring your own needs and your own desires and your own health. That's how you get burnout. And then you're not teaching anyone or helping anyone. Don't leave in a way that's unhealthy. Don't leave in a way that might be chaotic for students. I understand that mentality. I stayed longer than the 2 weeks notice because I wanted to close out after a card marking, so it'd be easier to transition to a new teacher. I wanted to do that. I wrote goodbye notes to my students. I told them they could follow up with me. I tried my best to make that transition okay. I totally understand if you teach special ed or younger kids, and maybe you have a different perspective on how kids are affected by someone leaving during the year. I get it. But please don't think that you leaving is just abandoning all children forever. You need to take care of yourself. I would especially say, if you're in an unhealthy school environment, if your admin isn't healthy, if your school culture isn't healthy, if kids' safety and well-being and happiness isn't prioritized, it's okay to get out. You don't want to become part of a system that's hurting kids. I am not saying you should go running at the first sign of adversity. Teaching is hard, really hard, and your first year is super hard. But it should not be impossibly hard. When I went back at the place I teach now, my first full year of teaching was really hard. But I was able to overcome it because I had good support, because I was in a better place myself, because I was ready, because I had grown. The second piece of advice I'd have for a first-year teacher is have a growth mindset for yourself. We talk about growth mindset for our kids, but then we act like teachers should just be perfect from when they graduate college. If you feel like a bad teacher when you first start, that's okay. You might be a bad teacher, or at least not a great teacher. What matters isn't where you are, it's what you're gonna do next. Are you gonna give up, say, you know what, I don't care, I'm just gonna be the teacher I am? Or are you gonna work on it? After I left my job, I practiced. I stayed in the school system through subbing. I read a bunch. I talked to teachers. I sought out mentors. I worked really hard to improve as a teacher. And I'm a much better teacher than I used to be. And I hope in another 3 years, I'm a much better teacher than I am now. I never want to stop growing, and that should be a priority for you too. There's a really steep learning curve, and it's okay to struggle, but you should have people there to support you. Find mentors. If they're not your admin or the official mentor given to you, they may even be on social media and not know they're your mentor, but you can take advice from them. If you need help, ask for it. Be fierce in seeking the help that you need. Require it, demand it, because you deserve that support to do your best work. The last thing I'm gonna say is be ready for it to be hard. If you're a new teacher, it's difficult. My mom is a veteran teacher. She always tells people the first year is twice as hard as the second year. The first month is twice as hard as the second month. The first day is twice as hard as the second day. And even the first decade is twice as hard as the second decade. It sounds a little silly, but it's kind of true. It gets so much better the more experience you have, the more practice you have, the more relationships and networks that you have. So if it isn't great, you can hold on. If it's terrible, maybe consider taking a break and working on bettering yourself. But don't give up if it's hard. Yes, it is difficult, but it's also so rewarding and beautiful and fun and exciting, and that should be how you feel about your job. So I really hope this video was interesting or helpful. If you liked it, please comment down below, subscribe to my new channel, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye!